So
then I can start now.
Few minutes. I'll just introduce you for few minutes. So
Okay.
let us welcome.
We are live now.
Yeah, let us welcome all for the second phase of the 128 celebration of 128 birth anniversary of Bose after the tea break. In this session, we have got a distinguished lecture by Dr. Rajendra Singh, historian, physics and science teacher. He is currently at the Karl von Ossietzky University, Oldenburg, Germany, and he is a prolific writer and science writer. He is an editor of Indian Journal of History of Science, Delhi, Science and Culture, Kolkata, Asian Journal of Physics. I think there was some duration, probably 17 to 19, and Scientific Voyage. Professor Dr. Singh has written about 31 books and more than 100 articles in the history of science. His specialization is Indian scientists, Nobel Prizes, and interactions between Indian and foreign scientists. So I don't want to read the list of the books, but some of the books definitely he has written very recently, that on Vibha Chaudhary, A Jewel Unearthed, the story of an Indian woman scientist, a book on D.M. Bose, a book earlier on J.C. Bose, very recently again Purnima Sinha and a doctoral work under Professor S.N. Bose, and Clay, Craft, Music and Science, Purnima Sinha's life. I'm sure that Dr. Singh will say more about the contributions of the Bose and Raman and about the history of science. So with this, I hand over to you, Dr. Singh, for your talk.
Okay, so then shall I try to start now?
Yes, please.
But how to do that? Let's.
You just prompt us and we will change the slides for you.
So okay, so it is unfortunately a little bit different story which I wanted to tell today. But start with this one as I started my career as history of science when I began with my thesis on Professor C.V. Raman, and that thesis was on Nobel laureate C.V. Raman's work on light scattering, and this was later. Are you able to hear me clearly?
Yes, sir.
Okay. This was later also published in India too. Next, please.
Next slide.
Next slide.
Yes, sir.
So I consider myself, if not the expert, but at least an expert on C.V. Raman because I wrote 6 different books. And here you see the 3 books which deal with C.V. Raman's interaction with Indian media, and the forwards were written by Dr. Dinesh Sharma, Professor Anab Chaudhary, and Professor Ajoy Khattak. Next. So it is much more easy to write on C.V. Raman, Meghnad Saha, and S.N. Bose, but it is very difficult to write on the so-called less known persons like our Upendranath Brahmachari. He was the first Indian to be nominated for the Medicine Nobel Prize. Then I also wrote on S.K. Mitra, the founder of India's atmospheric science. The forward, it was written by Professor Subrakash Roy. Next, please. Then Professor Roy and myself, we wrote 2 more books on S.N. Bose, D.M. Bose, and then there is 1 book from me on S.C. Sircar and Bidubhushan Ray. Both of them, they were students of C.V. Raman. Next, please. So it is very exciting to write on the so-called unknown persons. And here is one story about which we are very proud of. That is Vibha Chaudhary, who was the first Indian woman who did her research on the high particle physics. Our book, if I say our, that means Professor Subrakash Roy and myself, was published in 280. The second German version 220, and thanks to Professor Vandana, Nadal and Arun Kumar Grover, that the next extended version is going to be published by the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, and it is supposed to come next month. Next, please. So, what I want to say is sometimes it's interesting to write on such persons because, as you see, after the publication of this book, many Indian newspapers they wrote about it. For example, the Telegraph and the Better India, it said this brilliant woman could have won a physics Nobel Prize for India, yet few Indians know her story. Another newspaper wrote, thanks to Dr. Singh and Ray effort to bring information about Viva to the foreign, this brilliant Indian physicist is finally getting the recognition she never received during her life. And further we read, the author says, we hope that this propels the Indian government to recognize Viva Chaudhary's achievement. Indeed, it was done by the government, but before that, next please. But before that, next slide. But before that, the international scientific community recognized her. An exoplanet was named after Viva Chaudhary, and I believe Professor Sumak Ray Chaudhary, he was the person who initiated this step. Next, please. And the government of India also gave her recognition. 11 chairs, they were named after Indian women scientists, and here we see one chair, that is chair of physics. It was recognized or named after Viva Chaudhary. Next, please. So next, we can skip this one. Next.
So we are on the next slide.
Next slide, please.
Yes, sir, we are already on the next slide.
Yeah, the next one. I want to skip this one. Yes, from here we start. So now I come to the real topic which I wanted to talk about, and it is interaction between Professor K. Banerjee, this gentleman, who was student of Professor C.V. Raman, and then Professor S.N. Bose, whose birthday we are celebrating today. And the next slide. Before I proceed further, I would like to say a few words about Indian Association for the persons who are not inside Bengal or Kolkata, because I'm often going to use this word. The Indian Association for the Cultivation of Sciences, it is considered as the oldest institute with a modern science. It was founded in 1876 by Mahendra Sircar. Next slide. So my talk is like this. A few words about K. Banerjee. I'm not going in detail because the detail you will find in my next forthcoming book. Then interaction between Professor Banerjee and C.V. Raman. And then most of the part, it is on Professor Niels Bohr, the story of the Nobel Prize, his connection with the Western scientific community, as he as a national professor. And the last part, I believe I have made it for those who are interested in the history of science plus the authority of the S.N. Bose Center. It is going to be some sort of home task for the authorities. Next slide, please. Yes, Professor K. Banerjee, he is known for his discoveries or achievement in the field of crystallography, that means the science of crystals, how the atoms they are arranged in it. We know very well the normal salt which we eat every day consists of two types of atoms, but in the case of aromatic compounds such as anthracene, the story is quite complicated and difficult. The achievement of Professor K. Banerjee was, next slide please. that he determined the atomic arrangement in the crystal of naphthalene and anthracene. With that, he opened up the field of analysis of the atomic structure of aromatic crystals. And second, he developed an algebraic method for the determination of the structure of crystals. Next. Even today, his work is well known. It is being cited by different news journals, and at the 100th birth anniversary of Professor K. Banerjee, the Indian Association for the Cultivation of Sciences, they organized an international seminar. Professor Debashish Mukherjee, in those days he was the director of the Indian Association, and here we see the first medal given to Professor Bell, who appreciated Professor K. Banerjee's work and its importance even after the 1970s. Next, please. Next slide.
Yes, sir. We are on the next.
Okay. So, the Raman effect is more for general public. The Raman effect clearly means if you send one color of light or monochromatic light through a sample, and after the scattering in the sample, there is not only one color but more, and this extra color, they give us information about the structure of the sample. And next.
Yes, sir.
So here we see the first spectrum taken by Raman, and here we have the upper photograph, mercury spectrum, which is filtered through a blue glass, and below we have spectrum from benzene, and here we see the extra lines. These new lines, they give us information about the substance what we want to study. Professor K. Banerjee, in one of the articles, he wrote that the discovery was made by Professor Raman at midnight, and he also wrote at that time the Indian Association had only one small spectrograph, and for me, these statements, they are some sort of fairy tales, like the statement Professor Raman required only 300 rupees for the discovery, or Professor Raman, he wept under the British flag while receiving the Nobel Prize, and according to my opinion, these stories, they are not quite correct. Next, please. So how expensive were Raman's instruments, what he needed, from where he was buying, and so forth and so on. These details I have produced in this book, and the foreword was written by Professor Rai Chaudhary. Next. So if Professor K. Banerjee, he applied for the position at the University of Dhaka. At that time, Professor C.V. Raman, he gave the recommendation letter. There he read that Professor Banerjee, he did his D.Sc degree in the determination of the naphthalene and anthracene. This statement is only partially true, but what important is Raman, he acknowledged that Professor Banerjee, he's the expert in the field of X-rays. Also, his wonderful knowledge of optics, metrology, and the modern physics. So next, please. So after these recommendation letters, Professor Banerjee, he got the position at the University of Dhaka, and there he came in contact with Professor S.N. Bose, who was at that time the director of the head of the Department of Physics. Next, please. So now I come to the next stage, that means shortly before India independence, Professor Bose and K. Banerjee, they came back to Kolkata, but here we are talking about 1959. At that time, Professor K. Banerjee, he was in Allahabad as head of the physics department, and Professor S. N. Bose, he was president of the Indian Association for the Cultivation of Sciences, and in this letter, he informs K. Banerjee that he has been appointed as the director of the Indian Association, and before him, Professor S. C. Sircar, he was the acting director, and he was also a Raman student, and he gives entirely different story about the discovery of the Raman effect. And from this book from me, the forward for this was written by Professor Bhattacharya, one of the previous director of the Indian Association. Next, please. Now here I find something very interesting, at least for me it is an interesting story, that Professor S. N. Bose, who is the president, he want to resign from the post, even if the council stayed behind him. In the end, he remained to his idea and he did not withdraw the resignation. For me, the question was, next please. Next.
Yes, sir.
So, for me, the question was, what could be the reasons why Professor S. N. Bose, he do not want to remain as a president? The answer I think I found is in this letter, which is not very readable. It is signed by various employees of the Indian Association, and they tell him about the miserable financial condition at the Indian Association. I believe he was not able to do anything and he preferred to resign. This seems to be the reason of the resignation. Next, please. The Nobel Prize stories. These are well-known prizes. Everybody wants to have it, and everybody knows about them. The next slide, please. I consider myself as the expert. It may sound a little arrogant, but I have written 6 books which deal with Indian men of science nominated nominees in the time period from 1901 till 1964. Based on this book, I'm going to give talk at the Dhaka Institute for Fundamental Research. That will be on 19th of February, and I hope next time there is nothing like what is happening today with that digital system. Next, please. Now, Professor S. N. Bose and the Nobel Prize. The story has been for a long time. What I found until the day is Professor K. Banerjee, he was the first person who nominated Professor Bose in 1956. The second nomination followed by Professor D.Sc. and the third was in 1962 by S. N. Banerjee. Unfortunately, I do not have photograph. And here by A.K. Dacca, he nominated 3 persons. According to the rules, you can nominate as many persons as you want. Next, please. Next. Yes. So, okay. The Nobel Prize, according to the process, runs like this. The Nobel Committee asks its expert to evaluate the work of a scientist. And then the Nobel Committee gives its own report. In the case of Professor Bose, the report, it was written by Oscar Klein. He wrote, S. N. Bose, Kolkata has been nominated for the introduction of Bose statistic in atomic and nuclear physics in the year 1924, and for its contribution to the development of Einstein field theory from the year 1953. His statement was very straightforward, and he evaluated the report very negative For example, he said, compared to the work of other researchers in the same field, Bose's work cannot be considered worth of the Nobel Prize. The same statement, it was given by the Nobel Committee. So that was the end of the Nobel Prize. For the next nominations, S.N. Bose's work was never evaluated. Whether he was nominated after 1964, this I cannot say today. Next. S.N. Bose had his connections. It is well known that he was in France, and in France he worked with different French scientists. For a short time he was in Germany. There he met Raman from Mark, and later he had contact with Professor Paul Dirac too. These are the well-known stories, so I'm not going to say anything about it. But the next one. So Professor S.N. Bose and Albert Einstein. When I wrote this book, which means not only with S.N. Bose, but also many other Indian physicists and chemists who communicated with Albert Einstein, my idea was to see how the Indian scientific community size photoquantum and also the theory of relativity. And also my opinion, they are different than some of the persons who believe Albert Einstein, he betrayed S.N. Bose. So the Indian newspaper, at least 6 different newspapers, they reported under this title, no evidence of rift between Einstein and S.N. Bose. Next, please. Okay, another important person for Indian and Indian history of science is Max von Loy. And here we see Professor S.N. Bose at Fritz Hauer Institute, 1953. Why it is important? Because Professor N.R. Singh, on whom we are writing a new book, it will be out in 2 months, I think. We means Professor Roy and myself. Professor N.R. Singh, he is known as the founder of the applied mathematics in India and the Kolkata School of Theory of Relativity. He did his Ph.D. under Max von Loy, and the work, it was on the theory of relativity. This seems to be the reason that how he then later began with this field of research. Next, please. Professor Niels Bohr and S.N. Bose. Here we see Mr. Utare, again from me, and he was also the person who made contact between Professor Niels Bohr and Professor S.N. Bose. And in 1924, he was sent by Raman to work under Niels Bohr and Professor C.V. Next, please. Professor Bose, he was for a short time in, so here you don't see it unfortunately, here we have document which shows that Professor S.N. Bose, he was for a short time, here you missed. So that's Professor Bose, he was for a short time at the Niels Bohr Institute. And here we see another letter from Professor Bose as the president of the Calcutta Mathematical Society. He invited Niels Bohr to take part at the Golden Jubilee celebration. But he didn't come, but he came next year. And next slide, please. So here we see another letter from Professor S.N. Bose to Niels Bohr, and he is told he will be awarded with the Bimala Churn Law Gold Medal. And this award was also given to Albert Einstein, Max von Loy, Enrico Fermi, and here we see the award or the medal was given to Professor Niels Bohr on 18th January 1960. Next, please. Professor S.N. Bose as National Professor. Next slide. So, Professor Bose had this honor. There are only very few Indian physicists who got this honor. If you see the list of his publications, practically in this period, it started in 1959. There is nothing, and then I made the complete list, which is based on the annual report of the Indian Association. And there you see what a huge amount of money he was getting every year. Here, 67,000. It doesn't seem to be too much according to today's standard. But if we compare this money with what Professor S.C. Sircar was getting, he was getting only 5,000 rupees per year for his project. Then Professor, even the director of the institute, K. Banerjee, he was getting for one project 5,000, for the second of 5,000. So for me, the big question was what he did with such huge amount of money. Because the report of the association, they say nothing. They gave us information about the other professors, list publication. So that puzzled me a lot till I found one article, only one article I could find. That was the helium project, which was made by or done by Professor Bose with S.T. Chatterjee. After I got the invitation, I looked into the document which I possessed, and I was myself surprised, because then I found the document which gave me the answer. He had a number of such workers who were working with him on different projects. Here is only a very simple example. Kedareswar Banerjee and Ghosh and Kumar. That means in the end I found the answer. There are documents which show us that he did a number of projects at the University of Kolkata as well as at the Indian Association. So with that I was happy, and that means this work can be done by others further. Next, please. Next, yes. Now here is a little bit sad story, because it was the 50th birth anniversary of Bose statistic. There is great arrangement in Kolkata. They are going to celebrate in great function, and at that time what happened is that the term of national professor was not extended. Then Mr. Dacca, he wrote a letter to the Prime Minister of India, and he told her it will be embarrassing for her when she comes to Kolkata at the time of inauguration, and it is told to her that the term of Professor S.N. Bose has not been extended, and he even requested to extend that term for a lifetime, as it was done in the case of Professor S.C.V. Raman. Next, please. Next.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now, the 125th anniversary, it was celebrated also in the case of Saha. I was a little bit involved, and as means I was aware that there are many functions, and also there was this nice book and many others which was brought out by the National Academy of Sciences of India, but I was not aware about this ceremony, and also I was not aware that at that time there was a great function. I'm thankful to the director who sent me these photographs and told me that at that time there was inauguration of a museum and an archive. So next, please. So now, also recently I came to know that there is a wonderful film which is also made by the S.N. Bose Center, and there is a documentary which is also available in internet. Next, please. Now, for me, the question is: we have already seen there are already scientific paper of Professor Bose. There are a number of biography from him, and also we have museum. There is archive. The question is there something else which can be done for future? According to my opinion, yes, there is much and enough is still to be done. For example, minor correction can be made according to the record of the S.N. Bose archive. Here we see Professor Bose with Niels Bohr. According to my opinion, this person, he cannot be Niels Bohr if we compare these photographs. And the next question is who this person can be, could be. Next, please. I talked to the director of the Niels Bohr archive, and he sent me this photograph. This is taken from the time when Professor Bidhu Bhushan Ray, he was at the Niels Bohr Institute. We are of the opinion that this person, it is at a more similarity with, from spectacles, from auspicious frontal, that this person, it is very likely that it is Bidhu Bhushan Ray, not Niels Bohr. And there are also letters which tells us that in March 1926, Bidhu Bhushan Ray and S.N. Bose, both of them, they were in Berlin in those days. Next, please. So another record here, this gentleman is supposed to be Niels Bohr. According to my opinion, no, he cannot be Niels Bohr. If we see the next photograph, the next slide, please. Yes, and here we see. Is there something wrong with the microphone? So here we see Niels Bohr with Pandit Nehru. Here with Homi Baba, that was in 1960, that was 1957, and I really do not see any similarity between these two persons. Next, please. Next slide.
Yes, sir, we are next.
Yes, okay, thank you. Now, Professor S.N. Bose, he was one of the very, very few Indian scientists who were elected as the Fellow of the Royal Society of London. According to the rules and regulations, only those persons who are Fellow, they can nominate the other persons, and also they can support the other nominations. According to my knowledge, until the day we don't know how many scientists they were nominated by Professor Bose or how many they were supported. In the end, I was able to find at least this one letter written by Professor M.G.K. Menon to Professor Bose, in which he asked him to support the nomination of Devendra Lal, who was the head of one physical laboratory in Allahabad. And as we know, he was also later elected as the Fellow of the Royal Society. Next, please. Next. Okay. There is a wonderful book on Meghnad Saha and Parliament. As we know, Meghnad Saha, he was an elected candidate, and at the same time, Professor S.N. Bose, he was nominated. How many biographers they have written on S.N. Bose and his time in the Parliament? What he did during this time, I don't know. I don't know how many persons. So this is one of the points where more work can be done. And here is another interesting letter that is sent by the President of the National Institute of Sciences of India. In these days, it is called the Indian National Science Academy, and he is asked to support the government of India in the crisis. The letter was written at the time of when there was war began between Pakistan and India. Next, please. So we have already seen that S.N. Bose Institute have museum. I don't know whether these instruments, they are also available there. These are photographs about 2 decades ago at the University of Kolkata. According to my opinion, it will make sense if all the instruments, they are at one place. So this can be also done in future. Next, please. Then Professor Bose, he is supposed to be the person who guided very few theses. This, okay. The question for me is, are there copies of these theses in the archive of the S.N. Bose Center? If not, they can be acquired, they can be copied. At least 3 of the document I was able to locate at the University of Calcutta. Next, please. Next. So there is another fascinating story. I believe these letters are completely unknown. This one letter written on 18th August 1921 by young S.N. Bose from Dhaka. At that time he was appointed as reader, and there he writes the journal. They are not available there. He requests the librarian of the Asiatic Society of Bengal to send him particular journals, and these letters, they are available at the Indian Association, at the Asiatic Society of Bengal. Such letters, they can also be made as collection in the archive of the S.N. Bose Center. Next, please. Next. Okay, another fascinating and fantastic story, at least for us. While here we see Arun, the women who made the history. First of all, she was student of Professor S.N. Bose, and in her writing we found she wrote that she had 3 long interviews with Professor S.N. Bose. If they are properly confirmed, his interview are with 2 ladies who are professors in India, and they are the daughters of Professor Arun, and again the foreword was written by Professor Chandra Shah, the women who made the history, because she is the first woman to be elected as the president of the Indian National Science Academy. So next, please. Sorry, once again back. So another, according to her saying, Urmasina saying, Professor S.N. Bose had 4,000 pages of the writings. For me, the big question is where they are. Are they still with the family of Professor Bose? If yes, one should try to acquire their copies at least before they get lost forever. So next, please. Acknowledgement, for me, this is one of the most important part. Next. So history of science is not a one-man show. There are hundreds and thousands of persons who help us, and without archives and libraries, this work is not possible. As you see in the next slide, I have quoted just few names here. You do not need to read. I simply wanted to tell that the archives, they play important role for the historians. Next, please. So about the next slide, I'm really not very happy now because there were some wonderful photographs. First, I would like to thank Professor Samit Kumar Ray, director, for the invitation, and then my research group at the University of Edinburgh, my previous boss, Professor Fartis, and then Professor Vishal Komorek, and of course, different number of persons in our research group who always help me whenever I need their help. Next, please. At this stage, also, I would like to thank my family in Germany, my son, my daughter, my wife, and of course, my brothers and sisters in India. And next, please. Next. So this list is in fact very long. Without going into detail, I would like to thank late Santi Chatterjee. He is well known in Calcutta. He was the biographer of Bose. If I properly remember, he was also one of the persons who began with the archive. He was also the biographer of Meghnad Saha, and he was also one of the students of Meghnad Saha. Then at Bose Institute, we have constant contact. And then at the University of Kolkata, presently I am working with these two gentlemen on one project. And some of the documents which I showed here, I acquired when Professor P.N. Ghosh, he was the head of the department. At the University of Yadavpur, he was previously professor there. He's one of the fan of history of science and one of my supporters. Then there cannot be the history of science without the history of Indian Association. And there cannot be the history of C.V. Raman without the Indian Association. No surprise that I came in contact, and I'm still in contact with most of the previous director of this association. Only recently I came in contact with Professor Saib Ray. We are writing very often together. And here another gentleman, Professor Vikas K. Chakravarti, the previous director, the support of the history of science, plus he is the person to whom I call as the founder father of physics in India. And then I would like to thank also the nephew of Professor Vidhu Bhushan Ray, who sent me some of the documents. And next, please. Next. So, okay, in Bangalore, there are many persons who helped me. Pranab Rai Chaudhary, P. Raman, D.C. Malak, the biographer of K.S. Krishnan, Indra Chaudhary, the biographer of Omiji Bappa. Previously, she was a TIFR, and now she is in Bangalore. In Delhi, there are a number of persons who are helpful to me. Ajoy Gattak, Datta Roy, Devan Pachak, Deepak Kumar, and Raman. These two persons, they have produced a number of historians of science, because both of them, they are at the Jawaharlal Nehru University. When I require document for my research at the Indian National Science Academy, I always seek the help of Professor Ashok K. Singhvi, and also these three persons, Dinesh Sharma, Jana Chattopadhyay, Ambedkar Bhattacharya. They also make my work popular in India. In Allahabad, I was not aware that the National Academy of Sciences of India, they have done a wonderful work on the history of science. Till these books, they were sent to me. At that place, I would like to thank Professor Manju Sharma, the woman who made the history, because she was the first woman to be elected as the president of the National Academy of Sciences of India. And also I thank Dr. Neeraj Kumar, the secretary, for sending me these books. And now I am coming closer to my talk. In Punjab, my work is practically unknown. The only two persons who know my work are Professor Hardev Singh Vig and Professor Arun Kumar Grover, who are supporting my adventure in the history of science. Next, please. So in the end, I would like to thank all of you. Thanks for your patience. And I would like to thank the director for sending the invitation. And I am extremely sorry that what the things they happened because we tried 2 days ago, it worked wonderful. Anyway, if you have any questions, you are most welcome to ask or you can send an email. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, Dr. Rajendra Singh, for an excellent coverage on the history of science. Many things are, of course, unknown to us, and there are many missing links. Hope it will be clarified in the future, and we are hoping for your personal visit to SN Bose Center sometime when the situation becomes normal. So you are invited to visit SN Bose Center whenever things becomes normal. So obviously we can take up the questions in case there is a question in the chat box or in case there's a question from the audience.
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So let's see.
Can I ask?
Yeah, sure.
Yes. So this is. Can you hear me, Dr. Singh?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. So this is related to the story about the book on SN Sircar regarding Raman's discovery of the Raman effect. So of course you have a book, I know, and I would like to read it. But as a motivation, can you tell us one or two brief lines? What is the main gist of that book?
Sorry, once again, please.
Yeah, so this is related to the discovery of the Raman effect and the story by SN Sircar. So as I understand, you have written a book on it. Am I correct?
I have written, the main book is on S.C. Sircar. Yeah. And it's a very small part on the discovery also because Professor S.C. Sircar, he wrote that when the first spectrum was taken, and he was the person who was given this spectrum for the evaluation to find out more information on the lines, but he was not able to find. He also writes that Professor C.V. Raman told him that half of the discovery was made by K.S. Krishna. That is what Professor S.C. Sircar wrote in one of the articles.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So another, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Another curiosity that I think from one of your slides, when you were listing the salary of Professor S.N. Bose. So in 1960, you quoted a figure of 67,000, but in 1970, it became something like 40,000. So did I see correctly? Why did his salary reduce? Do you have any idea?
No, it is not the salary, it was the grant he was getting for the international professor.
So why did it reduce? So that is the question. Do you have any insight?
So why it reduced? About this I really cannot say why it reduced. I simply took the numbers. Every year he was getting not the same grant, but it was always different. And why it was different about this, I cannot say.
So, Dr. Singh, I think this grant was coming from the government of India as a national professorship grant, isn't it? It's not from the College of Science, yeah. So, because you compared some grant that was some other scientists were getting that was much smaller, because this grant came from the government of India, but not from ICS. So that's why so much of difference. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for the information. So that means the grant what a professor gets at the association, it is from the association, and Professor S.N. Bose was getting from the central government.
Yeah, government. It is a national.
Okay, thank you very much for the information.
Yeah, I just can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm just curious that you mentioned that there was no rift between S.N. Bose Center and Einstein. S.N. Bose and Einstein. Why this question of rift arise? I mean, because I read somewhere that Einstein was not particularly friendly or was not very confident about the capability of the Asian scientists. In fact, he made some adverse comments about the Asian scientists.
Okay, can you give me the reference, please?
I can give you the reference, but I'm curious to know why this comment was made that there was no rift between S.N. Bose and Einstein. Was there any, reason to raise this kind of suspicion that there would be a rift between the two?
Yeah, because there are some statements in the literature telling us that S.N. Bose was betrayed by Einstein
In what
because
sense? Yeah.
because in the first paper by Professor S.N. Bose, there was supposed to be the concept of spin-off photon, the factor 2.
Right.
And some people believe because Einstein, he left this factor 2, he left the concept of photon from the paper.
Right.
And then when we also read in the literature, there is one gentleman from Kolkata, he was a student of Professor S.N. Bose, that once he talked to him, he said, please close all the doors and windows. Today I am going to tell you what something very secret. That secret was, oh, this old man, he deleted the factor 2. So due to this thing, I am not going to get any credit for the spin of the photo.
Okay. Yeah.
But for me, the simple question is, Professor Bose lived much longer than Einstein. In the writings, we don't find anything, any letter or something else. I know the Indian argument also, okay, Professor Bose is seen as hero and guru. According to Indian culture, we do not criticize our teacher. So for me, this is not the right argument.
No, I think the proposal for the spin of a photon, which was Bose's thing, was really prescient. It was the first kind of proposal for the spin of a quantum particle. So it was really much ahead of his time. So and one more thing I want to say, there is evidence of letter exchange between Einstein and Bose as late as in the 1950s. That letter has been reprinted in Kameshwar Wali's book on selected papers of S.N. Bose. The letter that Einstein had written to Bose, the original letter.
I possess all the letters from the very beginning till the end. Not
so
very
that one has mention of his work in unified field theory and discussions along these lines.
That's true. Yeah.
So there was a continued relationship between Bose and Einstein throughout.
I think Bose was at least. I think this is one of the points we know very little about Professor S.N. Bose, because about Raman having correspondence from the very beginning till the end. For Professor S.N. Bose, I think even the S.N. Bose don't have all the documents. I think there is big gap. We need to do much more research to find much more about his contact with the Western men of science. But there are some evidences.
There is one book in Bengali called Amader Kotha that my mother had, had put together. That was actually Bose's words. So that has a lot of information about his interaction in the West. So that would be of value actually.
Oh, that's valuable. I think it is always difficult because on the one hand you want to promote your own culture, your own language, and at the same time for me it is some sort of dead knowledge. It will make some sense to translate into English so that others they cannot know.
It would be great to be able to translate it to English, but
that's good. I am waiting for that.
That will be a good thing to do.
Yeah.
Next. Do you have any other question?
So if the book cannot be translated, let somebody just records it in an oral way and then somebody else can sort of put it together. Otherwise, it will not happen. So I will suggest to Rajendra Singh ji to get hold of a Bengali friend and he just sort of, yeah, this is the way to
Yeah.
practically to do it quickly.
Right. In fact, it was transcribed by my mother from a tape conversation with Bose. So those,
Okay.
so it was in a direct transcription from tapes. That's what happened. Of course,
Okay.
yeah.
So this you can do also, I think. Then you are the right person for that.
Yeah, I found that I actually tried to translate that. Some of Bose's words are very colloquial, and so
Okay.
I found it tough to translate some parts of it. But it has a lot of information.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Any question? You can either raise your hand or you can unmute yourself and ask the question.
I just want to make a small correction
Sure.
that
Yes,
Professor
please.
Devendra Lal was at Ahmedabad. Actually, he was at TIFR. He was one of the first students of Homi Bhabha, joined
Okay.
Bhabha in 1949, then later on worked for his PhD with Bernard Peters, and then he went to California and he left TIFR in 1972, few months after Sarabhai's death. Sarabhai passed away in December of 71, and
Okay.
it is after that that Devendra Lal was moved as a director of PRL Ahmedabad. Professor Lal died only a few years ago,
Uh-huh.
and he used to come to Ahmedabad minimum once a year, and I mean just some. I can tell you a lot about Devendra Lal as and when we meet.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, once I wrote one article also about Bernard Peters, how he came to India.
Yes.
Which role was played by, it was published in the Indian Journal of History of Science. I can send you the
Yeah, thank
publication.
you. I was close to Professor Lal for a few years
Okay.
after the year 2004. I sort of got him back to TIFR after a long time. He had left India at the age of 60 and then he returned to India many, many years later. He returned to TIFR many years later, though he used to come to Ahmedabad every year. He left half of his property to PRL Ahmedabad and the other half to
Okay.
University of California,
Mm-hmm.
where he was a emeritus professor at Scripps Institute of Oceanography.
Okay.
Any other comments? Then otherwise, I mean, it was really an illuminating lecture for us, and it was very nice to see a lot of our senior teachers in the audience, Professor Gover, Professor Pathak, and I can see Professor Pathak, Professor Ghatak, many other people are there. So we are really happy to meet you online, sirs. And so now it is my pleasant duty to put a actually vote of thanks. So we are really thankful to Dr. Singh for agreeing to give this lecture on a New Year day instead of spending time with his family. So thank you very much, and your invitations to visit Assemble Center is open anytime you come to India next time. And then we'll be presenting a memento online, which will be actually posted to your
Oh,
residential
thank you very
address.
much.
So yeah, so I'm taking a photograph which will be virtually sent to you, and
Yeah,
this will
thanks.
be in front of Assemble picture. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Most welcome. Thank you for the invitation. See
Thank
you,
you so much.
Samit.
So I think our today's celebration will be concluded with that documentary film that we were talking about, that on S.N. Bose, that iconic genius. It's about 24 minutes, which was released about 3 years back on the Bose 125 occasion. So particularly those who have not seen it, so you are welcome to see this movie. We'll stream it right now. Okay? Sure. Please. Yeah, sure. Oh, no. 20 times. Just let it run.
His office was in Shantanitam Palace. At that time, that was
Thank you.
আইনস্টাইনের একটা ট্রাভেল ডায়েরি আছে সেটাতে উনি বেসিস কমেন্ট করেছেন। সেটা বেরিয়েছিল সেই জন্যই যে তার কোন রকম এ আছে কিনা আমি জানি না। তবে ওই গল্পটা খুব পার্থক্য করেছিলেন।
এক সেকেন্ড স্ট্রিম করতে হবে তো, এখানে প্লে হলেই তো
করতে হবে, যারা ইউটিউবে আছে তারা দেখতে পাবে। এখন তো আমাদের অফ করা আছে, আমাদের অডিও অফ করা আছে। হ্যাঁ ঠিক আছে, কিন্তু জলদি কানেকশন
Smoking causes cancer.
That's what I wanted him to say.
But he didn't want to say.
He was hinting.
Right, it was already hinted. ঠিক আছে, প্রতিবছর একটা একটা ভালোই কাটে আমাদের। ঠিক আছে, ওই আপনার
Stream হচ্ছে না। এই তো।
ওই স্যার ওই যে পান্ডা কি না স্যার আন্ডার করবে যে
পান্ডা
এই তো অন করো, এটা তো ফ্রিজ হয়ে আছে। প্লে বাটনটা দিন।
কি করে কি হয় দেখতে পাবো।
ঠিক আছে,
এই তো হচ্ছে। এই তো হচ্ছে।
এতে হচ্ছে কিন্তু এতে যাচ্ছে
ইউটিউবে যাচ্ছে না, ইউটিউবে যাচ্ছে না বুঝলি, ইউটিউবে তো অনেক ছাত্রবাস্ত থাকতে পারে না, যাচ্ছে না।
এক সেকেন্ড আমাকে একটু সেট আপ করে নিতে দিন।
ঠিক আছে চলুন, ওনারা করে দেবে না।
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ
করে দিচ্ছি স্যার।
ওই যে চলে ওটা ছাত্ররা যদি দেখতে ইন্টারেস্টেড হয় দেখবেন, তো যেহেতু ইয়ের নোটিশটা গেছে।
হ্যাঁ ইউটিউবে গিয়ে যাচ্ছে তো।
Smoking causes cancer.
যাচ্ছে
ঠিক আছে,
Fantastic. Thank you.
little gone. চালিয়ে আপনার হ্যাঁ আপনি তাড়াতাড়ি প্রিন্ট করুন, উনি একটু খুব ইন্টারেস্ট ছিলেন অনেক টাকা হবে এটা দেখুন এটা তাড়াতাড়ি করুন।
Dear colleague, I have translated your work and communicated it to Zeitschrift für Physik for publication. It signifies an important step forward and I liked it very much. In fact, I find your objections against my work not wholly correct. For Wales displacement law does not assume the wave undulation theory, and Bohr's correspondence principle is not at all applicable. However, this does not matter. You are the first to derive the factor quantum theoretically, even though, because of the polarization factor 2, not wholly rigorously. It is a beautiful step forward. With friendly greetings, yours, Albert Einstein.
Professor Shrutendranath Bose is one of the legendary physicists of the 20th century, immortalized not only by coinages like Bose statistics, Bose-Einstein condensation, and Higgs boson, but half of the fundamental particles are named after him, bosons. He is indeed a Renaissance man, a patriot, and a polyglot.
22 Ishore Mill Lane, North Calcutta.
Happy New Year.
My childhood home. I was born here on the 1st of January 1894 to my parents Amudini and Shurendranath Bose. My father's great-grandfather Durgachorn had built this house in 1817. I was the eldest child and the only son in a family of 6 daughters. My family called me by the nickname Bodhi. Ours was a joint family, an ordinary middle-class Bengali family. Normal school. Indeed, that was the name of my first school on the Upper Chitpur Road, where I heard Rabindranath Thakur also studied. I was enrolled here at the age of 5. It took a long walk going to the normal school, so my parents transferred me to a school in the vicinity, the New Indian School, near my residence. I studied here till 1906. I was admitted to the famous Hindu school in my final year, but just 2 days before the examination, I was down with chicken pox. I missed the exam. I had to appear for it the following year.
Shrutendranath decided to study science. At that time, Presidency College had brilliant teachers. The faculty was studded with stars like Prafulla Chandra Rai and Jagadish Chandra Bose. Here he met his friends Meghnad Saha, Nikhil Ranjan Sen, Gyan Chandra Ghosh and others.
I had the good fortune of learning chemistry from Acharya Prafulla Chandra in the first year itself. But it was only after 2 years that I had the opportunity to study under Jagadish Chandra. I shall never forget those days. Most memorable were the times when he talked about electrical waves with demonstrations using his own instruments. After completing my D.Sc, I joined the mixed mathematics class, since I was more inclined towards theoretical science.
Shrutendranath taught in the ISc, BSc and MSc examinations. In fact, his marks in MSc examination is still a record. At the age of 20, while he was still a student of MSc, Shruten married Ushabala, daughter of Dr. Jogendranath Ghosh.
One day, Meghnad, Shoilen and I were summoned by Sir Ashutosh. We promised Sir Ashutosh that we would equip ourselves with the latest developments in modern physics. Apart from Sir Ashutosh's huge library,
which we could use freely, we also gained access to the excellent library of Dr. P.J. Brul, the versatile teacher of Shibpur Engineering College.
Bose's first paper, written jointly with Shah, came out in 1918 in the Philosophical magazine. His next two papers were based on pure mathematical problems. They were published in the Bulletin of the Calcutta Mathematical Society. His 1920 paper on the deduction of Rydberg's law from the quantum theory of spectral emission in Philosophical magazine attracted the attention of appreciative physicists. His collaborative work with Shah to translate Einstein's theory of relativity had a historic foreword by Prashant Chandra Mohalanovesh. It was a joint work of three stalwarts of Indian science. The book was published by the University of Calcutta in 1920.
In 1921, Mr. Hartog, the first Vice-Chancellor of the University of Dhaka, called me up in Calcutta. I was offered a readership at Dhaka.
During the course of lectures on thermodynamics to the MSc students, Bose found that there was a problem with the derivation of Planck's black body radiation law. And classical physics actually fails to explain the experimental results of black body radiations. And several workers, including Einstein himself, attempted to rederive this formula using only quantum concepts. However, none succeeded. Now it was at this juncture that Bose finally managed to crack the problem and give a completely quantum theoretic derivation of the black body radiation law. He used three things in his derivation: the fact that light was a quantum, it could also be used or interpreted as a particle, a concept that was in fashion at that time, and hence, you see, he coins this term, the light quantum.
Again, on 15th of June 1924, he sent the second paper to Einstein.
The Maxwell-Boltzmann distribution shows how particles are distributed as a function of energy. So there is a broad distribution, and the lower the energy is, the higher is the probability to find particles. Now, when the gas is cooled down, everything shifts to lower energy because lower temperature implies lower energy, and then the distribution gets shifted and looks approximately like this. But this is just the rescaling of the Maxwell-Boltzmann distribution. There is nothing really dramatic. The dramatic change came when Einstein applied Bose's concept to that situation. So let me plot again the number of particles versus energy. And at high temperature, Einstein obtained the result of Maxwell-Boltzmann distribution, which I discussed earlier. But now, when the gas is cooled down, there is again a shift towards lower energy, and the distribution gets a little bit sharper, but I can't draw it so accurately to show that. However, when you now cool to a little bit lower temperature, there is a phase transition, there is a sudden change where the distribution suddenly has this huge spike. This huge spike is a macroscopic population of particles in the lowest energy state, which in a gas is the state of zero velocity. So this spike here is called the Bose-Einstein condensate, and this was the dramatic consequence of the concept of indistinguishability which Bose introduced into physics. So in 1995 we observed Bose-Einstein condensation by cooling an atomic gas down to temperatures of 1 microkelvin or below. So we had reached absolute zero to within a millionth of a degree. And when we then measured the velocity distribution of the gas, we observed the following. What you see here is the broad distribution I explained earlier, the thermal distribution of a normal gas. But when we lowered the temperature, suddenly there was this sharp spike. This is the Bose-Einstein condensate. These are the atoms which are at rest, which are all in one quantum state.
In India, the first Bose-Einstein condensate in optical traps was achieved by Professor C.S. Unnikrishnan and his team at the Fundamental Interactions Laboratory of Tata Institute of Fundamental Research in 2007 by using magnetic fields and lasers to cool atoms to an extremely low temperature, just above minus 273.15 degrees Celsius, or nearly absolute zero. Dhaka University granted 2 years study leave for S.N. Bose to spend in Europe with an advance fund of Rs 13,800. Bose sailed from Bombay on 1st October 1924 on board a steamer of the Lloyd-Tristine line and reached Paris on 18th of October. In Paris, Bose put up at 17 Rue du Sommerard, a building which housed the Indian Students' Association. Bose's main interest seems to have been to visit the modern laboratories of Europe, particularly specializing in radioactivity and X-ray crystallography.
Dear Mr. Hot Dog, received your kind letter of the last mail. I am at present working at the X-ray laboratory of Maurice de Broglie. Madame Curie also has given me hopes of allowing me facilities for work in the Radium Institute from the beginning of the next year.
After spending 1 year in France in the company of luminaries of modern physics, Bose left for Berlin. He spent his time in Germany, studying, attending seminars, colloquia, and meeting people like Fritz Haber, Otto Hahn, Lise Meitner, Walter Botha, Hans Geiger, Peter Debye, Max von Laue, Wolfgang Pauli, Werner Heisenberg, and others. Berlin was then the center of learning that attracted scientists from all over the world. While in Germany, Bose visited Einstein frequently and talked about many subjects besides physics. It was in the idyllic atmosphere of Dhaka that Bose's versatile genius began to blossom. He did not confine himself to the subject of his own specialization, mathematical physics, but encouraged his colleagues and students to undertake new ideas, both in theory and in experiment. The X-ray laboratory of Dhaka soon became one of the finest of its kind in India. Right from his return to Dhaka, he had started guiding students in chemistry and published papers in chemistry.
বর্ণালী বীক্ষণ যাতে স্টাডি করা যায় সেই জন্য তিনি অনেকগুলো স্পেকট্রোমিটার যন্ত্র তৈরি করেছেন।
12টি বিভাগ নিয়ে ঢাকা বিশ্ববিদ্যালয় যাত্রা শুরু করেছিল, তার মধ্যে পদার্থবিজ্ঞান একটি। সেই ঐতিহ্যবাহী বিভাগে সত্যেন বোস কলকাতা থেকে তিনি ফলিত গণিত শাস্ত্রের মাস্টার্স ডিগ্রি করে এসে ঢাকা বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ে যোগদান করলেন লিডার হিসেবে। তা আমরা অত্যন্ত গর্বিত যে ঢাকা বিশ্ববিদ্যালয় এখনও যেখানে আমরা পরিচিত হই সকলেই বলেন সত্যেন বোসের বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়।
তার মৃত্যুর পর ঢাকা বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ের সিন্ডিকেট সিদ্ধান্ত নেন যে অধ্যাপক বোসের নামে একটি সেন্টার তারা স্থাপন করবে। তখন থেকেই যাত্রা শুরু হয় এই সত্যেন্দ্রনাথ বোস অ্যাডভান্স স্টাডি in research in natural sciences.
He was provost of the Dhaka Hall. He had to preside over all cultural and other events of the hall. But in 1945, he resigned from Dhaka University and joined Calcutta University as Khoira Professor of Physics. The faculty and the students of the University College of Science and Technology, Calcutta, were delighted to have Bose back into the fold. Bose continued his experimental investigations in crystallography and radiation physics with a group of very young workers. Soon, the Khoira laboratory was developed into a well-equipped center for crystal structure analysis. These were busy years for Bose. He became president of the Indian Physical Society from 1945 to 1948. He was the president of the National Institute of Sciences from 1948 to 1950 and was also nominated a member of the Rajya Sabha from 3rd April 1952 to 2nd April 1954 by the President of India. In 1954, he was honored with the title of Padma Vibhushan. He became the president of the Asiatic Society in 1959. During the period 1953 to 1955, he published 5 papers in quick succession related to Einstein's unified field theory.
Einstein was very keen to construct a theory which would be one theory for everything. Today it's called TOE, theory of everything. Now Einstein's theory, this unified theory, had a system of 64 equations all coupled to each other, and it was very, very difficult to solve. So Schrödinger made a comment in his book that it seems that no exact solution of these equations is possible. But Professor Bose did work on it, and in the next few months he came up with the exact solutions. And then he wrote several papers on this, but Einstein wrote back saying, okay, you've done this work, it's obvious you have worked so hard with such penetration. These are Einstein's words. But unfortunately, the solutions show that what I was expecting from these equations will not happen.
In 1953, Bose was invited to attend the World Congress for General Disarmament and Peace at Budapest. Invitations came from Soviet Russia, Denmark, and Czechoslovakia. On his way, he also visited Geneva, Paris, Copenhagen, Zurich, and Prague. He met Professor Pauli in Zurich and Niels Bohr in Copenhagen. The following year, Bose attended the International Crystallography Conference in Paris as a representative from India. He went to England in 1956 to attend the annual meeting of the British Association for the Advancement of Science. 2 years later, he went again to attend the Royal Society meeting, where he was elected a fellow. In 1962, he went to Sweden and from there to Moscow to attend the Peace Conference. In August 1962, he was invited to Japan to attend a seminar on science and philosophy organized to commemorate the atomic explosion over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. On 1st of July 1956, Bose became the Vice Chancellor of Vishwabharati.
হ্যাঁ আধা ঘন্টা হয়ে গেছে 10 মিনিট
দেখছি তো ইউটিউবে অনেকক্ষণ টাইম লাগবে
হ্যাঁ ইউটিউবে আছে তো এখানে আমি
তাহলে আমি কি বলছো নতুন করে কি দেবে
হ্যাঁ
ইউটিউবে তো আছে আবার ওইটাই তো বুঝতেই পারছি না কি দিয়ে পড়ে গেল
দূরে
So Satyendra Bose believed in Tagore's vision at Shantiniketan. Pandit Nehru, while addressing, he mentioned that to develop science and to encourage scientific temper in the university for the students, you had the best eminent scientist of the country or of the world, which is none but Professor Satyendra Bose. Professor Satyendra Bose lived in Abhaghar near Shambati, and his office was in Shantiniketan House. At that time, that was the only available infrastructure that we have at Vishwabharati. Vishwabharati awarded him Deshikottam in 1961. Tagore, in his last part of his life, he started reading and writing on science. And he wrote a book, Vishwa Parichaya. He had a lot of interaction with Satyendra Bose. We see a lot of correspondence of his letters, and he interacted with him even in scientific matters. So he dedicated his book on science, the Vishwa Parichaya, to Satyendra Bose in 1937.
On 18 December 1958, he wrote to the Chancellor and asked to be relieved from his duties as the Vice-Chancellor of Vishwabharati. In 1959, Bose was appointed National Professor. Bose shifted his office and laboratory to the Indian Association for the Cultivation of Science. He began to work over a wider field. One such project was the extraction of helium from the hot springs of Bokreshwar, first detected by Professor Shyamadas Chatterjee of Jadavpur. However, it was through the efforts of S.N. Bose that a field study unit was set up at the site.
I always strongly advocated the study of science in one's own mother tongue. I believed this way many more youngsters from a wider social spectrum would be attracted towards science. My dream was partially realized when, with this very objective to promote and popularize science through Bengali, I could establish the Bongio Bigyan Parishad in 1948. The Parishad organized conferences and seminars and arranged exhibitions and lectures rather successfully. And most importantly, published articles and books on science. The Parishad's monthly magazine, Gyan o Bigyan, became quite popular as well.
I am the youngest of my father's children, and I was 33 when my father passed away. He is a versatile genius. From the very young age, from when I was a little boy and all these luminaries in Bengali literature like Dhurjyoti Prasad Mukhopadhyay, Mukherjee says, and say Vishnu De, say Annada Shankar Rai, say Harit Krishna Dev, you might not know, he's a musician, also a historian. Harit Krishna Dev, Suniti Kumar Chattopadhyay, and painting from Jamini Roy, Bohr, and music circle. Ravi Shankar came to stay in Shantiniketan to our house, and musicians used to come and play for us in Ishwar Milan and Bahadur Khan. When I was there, he played in our house. And whether you know it or not, my father was a founder member of Jhankar. He played Esraj, but he never learned from any Guruji or music teacher. But by listening, people play music, he used to play himself Israel. And perhaps you'll be glad to know, or maybe surprised to know, that he even made ragas by himself.
In 1957, three universities, Calcutta, Jadavpur and Allahabad, conferred on him the degree of Honorary D.Sc. In 1958, Bose became a Fellow of the Royal Society. In 1961, Vishwabharati conferred upon him the title of Desikottama. He was awarded Honorary D.Sc by Indian Statistical Institute in 1962 and by Delhi University in 1964. He received Vigyan Bhaskaram from Sanskrit College, Calcutta in 1964, D.Lit from Rabindra Bharati University in 1970. The Satyendranath Bose National Centre for Basic Sciences was established by the Department of Science and Technology, Government of India on 13th of June 1986. This creation is a fitting tribute to the father of bosons. The area of research include theoretical sciences, astrophysics and cosmology, condensed matter physics and material science, including nanomaterials and the chemical, biological and macromolecular sciences. The center has on campus a large guest house and hostels, conference and seminar halls, laboratories, a library with state-of-the-art information support, as well as most competent aides to promote computational research. The center has strong symbiosis in teaching and research. The residential doctoral research program produces young Ph.D. awardees.
Half of the fundamental particles of the universe are named after him, called bosons. The significance of his work can be gauged by the fact that several Nobel Prizes have been awarded to the researcher worked on his ideas in diverse applications of physics.
In 2001, I received the Nobel Prize in Physics for the experimental realization and studies of Bose-Einstein condensates. January 1st is the birthday of Satyendranath Bose. Professor Bose has a special place in my life. My own research in physics is based on the discovery of Professor Bose. What was important about Bose's work was not so much that he rederived the Planck radiation law. What was much more important was the fact that he introduced the concept of indistinguishability into physics. When particles are indistinguishable, they are no longer independent, and this is a big new idea. This idea shaped the development of quantum mechanics. He died in 1974, but his ideas and his name will live forever in the textbooks of physics.
যাকে চেনা মনের একটি জয়, মানবিক বড় অভিজ্ঞতা। আশ্চর্য সে মন, সর্বদিকে ব্যাপ্তি, শিল্পে, সাহিত্যে, বিজ্ঞানে, সঙ্গীতে, অথচ নিত্য জীবন সম্ভোগে, এমনকি জর্দা পানে, ধূমপানেও, কিংবা ধূমপান ছেড়ে। you.